everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I wanted to talk about 10 things that writers, but in particular cis writers, should take into consideration when writing for trans characters, particularly when it comes to dysphoria. So number one is that the person experiencing dysphoria probably knows that it's not the end of the world. They probably realize that they're not going to die from this feeling. So you don't need to make the moment overly dramatic. It's definitely an important moment. It's definitely an emotional one, and it definitely sucks. Like, don't get me wrong, like, all of those things are true. But at the same time, you need to be reasonable with what you're saying, and you need to realize that people know when they experience dysphoria that there are worse things, but that doesn't make what they're going through any less hurtful or painful. It just makes them aware that, hey, this isn't as bad as it gets. And honestly, I personally found that kind of comforting when I realized that, because even though this really bad thing was happening, it's kind of comforting to know, hey, it could be worse. You could be dead. And number two, there doesn't necessarily have to be a trigger for dysphoria. Now, I understand why the majority of the time you would want to write dysphoria to have a trigger. You are definitely going to have readers who might know what dysphoria is, but they don't completely understand it. And it's a lot easier to understand something when you're realizing why it happens. And I think one of the most frustrating things about dysphoria is that a lot of the times you don't realize why it's happening, you just know that it is. And number three, no amount of rationalization is going to lessen the experience and how shitty it feels. I think that people think that you can just rationalize your way out of dysphoria, which makes no sense to me. That honestly just reminds me of when people tell me to think positively and my depression won't go away, or just calm down and my panic attack is gonna go away. Like, you fucking idiot, that's not how it fucking works, and you can't just rationalize your way out of dysphoria. And number four, people definitely take actions to alleviate dysphoria, but not everyone does, and not everyone is going to use the same methods, because the methods that someone uses is going to depend a lot on their dysphoria and how their dysphoria feels and what resources that they have access to, because not everyone can get hormones and surgery, and not everyone wants them, and not everyone wants a binder, and some can't afford a binder. I can't. When you're writing for a trans character, it's really important to just think about their dysphoria and where it usually manifests. Now, I'm going to go into this a little bit later in the video, but it's really important to mention that dysphoria doesn't always happen in the same place every time, but there are some places that dysphoria most often happens at. So depending on where someone feels dysphoric is going to affect how they are going to alleviate their dysphoria, and then you also have to take into consideration the resources that someone has access to. And number five, dysphoria obviously affects your body and your mind a lot, but it's also going to affect a lot of other aspects of your life, like your social life and your work life. For example, before I had came out to people, I was pretty much constantly dysphoric about everything, and I kind of felt like I was lying to everyone because no one knew that I was gender fluid, and no one knew that I was constantly experiencing dysphoria. Simply people misgendering me and by referring to me by feminine terms. And when you're feeling dysphoric, your social life is not going to be great. And this brings me into number six, which is people can truly affect how much a trans person is feeling dysphoric, or if they feel dysphoric at all. Because if you are close friends with a trans person, if you misgender or dead name them, a significant amount of time, trust me when I tell you that their dysphoria is going to be triggered real quick. So when writing a trans character that is experiencing dysphoria, it's also important to consider the person that the trans person is surrounding them with, because if they have really supportive friends and family around them, their dysphoria might be alleviated a little bit just from that, but obviously it's not going to completely go away. If your trans character isn't out to anyone and they're still trying to figure everything out for themselves, then they're really not going to have any support because no one knows yet, which means that their dysphoria is probably going to be triggered a lot more often. And number 7, dysphoria does not always happen in the same place. This is a huge misconception that I see all the time, but trust me, dysphoria is a bitch and dysphoria doesn't discriminate. It happens everywhere. Everywhere. And listen, there are definitely parts of your body that when you experience dysphoria, you're most often going to experience it in that place. But there's also times when you're just dysphoric about random parts of your body for no apparent reason, and it's just really confusing. It's just like, what the fuck? And number 8, not everyone is going to experience dysphoria the same. And in fact, some people don't experience dysphoria at all. And just because someone experiences dysphoria in a different way than I do, or just because someone doesn't experience dysphoria at all, that doesn't make them any more or less trans than I am. So it's important to note that if you have multiple trans characters in your book, make sure they aren't experiencing dysphoria in the exact same way. Because if they are, your readers are going to notice, and especially your trans readers are going to be like, oh, you did 0 research and you put no thought into this, did you? And number 9, different gender identities are going to experience gender dysphoria differently. So for example, I'm gender fluid, which means that my gender fluctuates a lot, and that also affects my gender expression, and all of that in turn affects when and if I feel euphoric. I am grateful right now because I'm in a feminine mood and I am honestly not feeling dysphoric at all at the moment, which is great, and I hope I don't jinx myself because dysphoria is a little so for me. Dysphoria isn't a constant thing that I deal with every single day. Sometimes I am in a feminine mood like I am right now. There are other gender identities where someone might constantly be feeling dysphoric. When you're writing dysphoria, it's also really important to think about your character's gender identity and how they are going to express their identity on a daily basis, or if that's going to change, stuff like that. Lastly, number 10, be mindful to what you are comparing dysphoria to. So I'm going to read you 2 sentences, and one of them I would personally find weird, confusing, and maybe even a little offensive, and the other one might be a little confusing for some people, but for the majority it probably makes sense. So sentence number 1. And then the second sentence that we have is, so in my opinion, the first sentence is a really good example of how you could explain someone's dysphoria to where it makes sense. And the second one is just confusing. You were left at a party and we're talking about dysphoria? What? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So there's nothing inherently wrong with comparisons, but you really need to be careful with what you're comparing it to because it can very quickly turn into you being offensive. And the easiest way to make sure that you are not being offensive is to have a first pool of people read your work. Have trans readers and critique partners, and maybe even consider hiring a trans sensitive activity reader. That's all that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please give it a big thumbs up and hit that big red subscribe button down below and turn on those post notifications so that you know every time that I upload. And let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions about writing dysphoria, or if you have any thoughts on the topic. I would love to hear from you, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!